Today's shir, as Hashem, we're going to focus, what is the mitzvah of Sukkah, the first night Sukkahs. This Sunday night we have a mitzvah to go into the Sukkah. I'm going to try to define the mitzvah. The Mishnah in Sukkah Daf Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, the Mishnah brings a machlokes tanoim. How many sudas a person is mechuyev to eat over Sukkahs? Rabbi Eliezer holds you have to eat 14 sudas, 2 every single day, 1 by night, 1 in the morning. That's Shittas Rabbi Eliezer. And Hachaim say, as long as you eat the first night a suda, you eat the first night your yoitza. The rest is whatever you want. If you want to eat, you have to eat in the sukkah. And if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat and you don't have to be in the sukkah. We're going to focus on Shittas Chachamim as we paskin like Chachamim. The Chachamim again say, Ein l'davar kitzvah. If you want to eat, you'll eat. And if you don't want, you don't have to eat. Chutz melel yom tov rishon shel chag. The first night, you're mechuyev to eat the first night in the sukkah. So the Gemara explains both Shittas. The Gemara explains what Shittas Chachamim, why you only mechuyev the first night, why you're not mechuyev the rest of Yom Tov. So the Gemara explains, Teishvu ke'en teduru. Just like in your house, if you want to eat, you eat, and if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat. So Sukkah is also, the din of going into the Sukkah is like your house. So if you want to eat, you have to go into the Sukkah, and if you don't want to eat, you don't have to go into the Sukkah. So therefore, all of Yom Tov, you're not obligated to go and eat sudas in the Sukkah. So the Gemara asks, if that's so why the first night of Yom Mechuyev, Teishu Kan Teduru, the first night Sukkahs in your house also, if you want to eat, you eat. If you don't want, you don't have to eat. So why the first night? So the Gemara says a drasha of tezvav. Just like by matzah, all of Pesach, if you want to eat bread, you have to eat matzah. But you don't have to eat matzah. However, the first night, it's not optional. It's a chayva. You have to eat matzah. So too, also, the Sukkahs, all of Sukkahs, it's optional. Like we see, Rishos, if you want to eat, you eat in the Sukkah. And if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat, and you don't have to go into the Sukkah. But the first night is chayva. So that's the drasha tezvav. Just like Pesach, only the first night is a chiyuv. But the first night is a chiyuv, so too Sukkah, the first night is a chiyuv. So that's Shittas Chachamim. This Sunday night, one is obligated to go and eat a suda, to eat in the Sukkah. The Rishonim ask, even though we see that is only a chiyuv the first night because of tezvav, but why isn't there a chiyuv the other days of Yom Tov, or at least Yom Tov by day? There should be a chiyuv medin sudas Yom Tov. Tosfos asked the Shaila, the other Rishonim, what does it mean? The other days is a rishos. Yom Tov morning, Monday morning, if you want to eat, you go into the sukkah. And if you don't want to eat, you don't have to eat and don't go into the sukkah. What does it mean you don't have to eat? Don't you have a chiyuv to eat a suda? So the Ram says to this Shaila, 2 terutzim. First of all, one teretz, which really is maybe even 2 parts, one teretz is that the first night of Sukkot is different in shear than the rest of Yom Tov. All of Yom Tov, Sukkot, if you want to eat kazayas, that's called arai. If you want to eat a kebeya, that's also called arai. You don't have to eat in the Sukkah. The Shulchan Aruch says, and Sif Tafresh Lamates Sif Beis, Achilas Arai is mutter chutz l'sukkah, v'kama Achilas Arai kebeya mipas, which means up until a kebeya you could eat out of the sukkah. So to be yoitza sudas Yom Tov, you could eat a kebeya of pas, and you yoitza and you could eat it out of the sukkah. But what it means, rotza lechoil, that we see that you have to eat. If you want to eat, you could eat. If you don't want, you don't have to eat. That's the shear that's machayev to go into the sukkah, and that's kebeya v'oid, a bigger shear. So why do we need a drasha the first night to be machayev? Typically you have a chiv of sudas Yom Tov. So the answer is, for the sudas Yom Tov, you could eat a kebeya. But to be mechuyev, to go and to sit in the sukkah, that you have to have kebeya v'oid. And then the Ran says the opposite, which is, you could call it another teretz. He says that the first night, the drasha tells me l'kula that even though the rest of Yom Tov you need a kabeya v'oid to be machayev to sit in the sukkah, the first night bekazayis already a chayev and you're yoitza. So which means the first night sukkah is to be yoitza, the mitzvah yeshiva sukkah, a kazayis is enough. So the first teretz in the Ran, why you need a drasha to be machayev the first night, and what does it mean the other days you're not machayev tepaklei sudas Yom Tov? The teretz is these are different shear the first night, whether l'chumra you need a bigger shear or l'kula a smaller shear. Another teretz says the Ran, what is it relevant the drasha to be machayev the first night tepaklei of sudas Yom Tov? The teretz says these are din. Since Teishvu Ke'en Teduru, if it's raining, a person is a mitzvah and he's potter from Sukkah. But when it comes to the first night, even if it's raining, you mechuyev to sit in the Sukkah. That's what the drasha says. To be yotzeh sudas Yom Tov, that's enough in your house also. You're not mechuyev to sit in the Sukkah, it's raining. But als the din tezvav, that you mechuyev like matzah, that it has to be dafka in the sukkah, and even if it's raining. So what we have so far, two terutzim to understand what the first night you mechuyev and what it's different than the rest of Yom Tov. Firstly, the first night you either mechuyev a bigger shir, which is really the same as the rest of Yom Tov, or firstly would be that the first night only a kazayas. That's one halacha. And another din would come out is that the first night you're mechuyev to sit in the sukkah, even though it's raining, as opposed to the rest of Yom Tov. You're not mechuyev. If it's raining, you're potter from sukkah. To better understand these terutzim and even more, why is it different the first night of Sukkot, the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah, than the rest of Yom Tov? As we see, the first night a kazayas is enough. The rest of Yom Tov, to be able to make a leishiv basukkah, you have to have kabeya v'oid. The rest of Yom Tov, if it's raining, you potter from sukkah. As opposed to the first night sukkahs, even though it's raining, if it is to rain Sunday night, the whole entire night, you have to go in the sukkah while it's raining and eat b'makayim, the mitzvah. So why is it different the first night of Sukkot than the rest of Yom Tov? And to better understand, we have to take a look in the Rishonim. What exactly is the chiyuv the first night of Sukkot? The mitzvah yeshiva sukkah. What is the mitzvah? What is the mitzvah? Partially we know, the Gemara says that you're mechuyev, and we learn tezvav, that you're mechuyev the first night, just like you're mechuyev to eat matzah the first night, tezvav Nisan, so too are you mechuyev to eat in the sukkah the first night, tezvav Tishrei. You can understand the chiyuv in two different ways. And this the Rishonim speak about. Is the chiyuv the first night, like the pashtus, what the Torah says, besukkah is teishvu shivas yam, to sit in the sukkah? You have a mitzvah this Sunday night, the first night of Sukkot, to go into the sukkah and sit in the sukkah. Now, obviously, you're only makayim yeshiva, you have to eat, because if not, you don't have a yeshiva. But the mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. That's the mitzvah. The only thing we learn from tezvav, from matzah, is just like by matzah, even though the whole Yom Tov it's a rishos, the first night you're obligated to eat matzah. So too Sukkot, the whole Yom Tov it's a rishos, but the first night you're obligated to sit in the sukkah. That's one way to understand the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah the first night. Again, what is the mitzvah? The mitzvah is sitting in the sukkah. Obviously, you only makayim the mitzvah by eating, but the mitzvah is sitting in the sukkah. We're going to see soon a few nafkaminas ladina, and that will bring out the two tzadim. So the first side is the mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. The second side is the mitzvah is to eat. Just like to eat a kazayas matzah. There's a mitzvah to eat. Obviously, you have to eat it in the sukkah. But the mitzvah is, even though it says sukkah is teishvu, and that's the whole Yom Tif with all the dinim. But the first night we learned Tezvav, the drush of Tezvav is a drush that the chiyuv is a chayvus achila. The first night you're mechuyev to eat in the sukkah. So again, we have two tzadim. What the mitzvah is the mitzvah sitting in the sukkah, or is the mitzvah the achila? Just to phrase it, is the mitzvah the yeshiva, sitting in the sukkah, or the mitzvah is the achila, to eat in the sukkah? Already right now, we see two tzadim, the two tzadim are going to make the chiluk on what we just spoke about. We said that the first night is different than the rest of Yom Tif. The first night, there are shitas arishonim that kazayas is enough. Kazayas is enough. The rest of Yom Tif, to be able to make a leishiv basukah, you have to have a kabei of oid. But the first night of kazayas is enough. If the mitzvah, the first night, is achila, so we understand why kazayas is enough, just like matzah. Matzah kazayas is enough. So the first night sukkahs kazayas is enough. But if the mitzvah is not an achila, the mitzvah is a kviyas, yeshiva in the sukkah. So just like the rest of Yom Tov, to be able to have a yeshiva and a sukkah, a kviyas, to be considered stationary in the sukkah, you have to have a kabei of oid, more than 2 kezesim. So too would be the first night, you have to have kabei of oid. That's one nafkamina, which, based on what we spoke before, how much you have to eat the first night. And also lagabi the rain. If it's raining the first night, you have to sit in the sukkah. If the mitzvah is the achila, it doesn't make a difference if it's raining or not. Obviously, you need to eat in the sukkah. Just a second. You have to eat it in the sukkah. But even if it's raining, you still eat it in the sukkah. As opposed to if the mitzvah is yeshiva, so teishvu ke'en teduru. Teishvu ke'en teduru says you have to have has to be not a mitzvah. And when it's raining, you're a mitzvah. So it's not a good sukkah. And mainly you're not going to be yoitza. You're not yoitza. What?
Are we we don't go in the summer, we go with dafka in the winter. I'm saying, I don't know if it's the Beis Kishamim that we're specifically going. In other words, we're going during the rainy season into the sukkah. So who cares if it's raining?
So
then why should Teshu do
pater? So first of all, Yeshua, what you're mentioning about that we go in the rainy season, I think it's rather we go in the time of fall. I don't think it's because it's the rain. It's more as opposed to spring. The time when Sukkah should really be spring. The Zman of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So that's actually the time everybody starts going out. Spring. That's the time you go out. So that would be it wouldn't be nikah you're doing it for the mitzvah. You go out as opposed to fall. That's already the time people started to put on the sweaters. You're actually moving into your house. So it's nikah you're doing a l'shem mitzvah. But the rain is lamaisa, if you're a mitzvah, you potter from sukkah. As opposed to if the mitzvah is the achila, so even if it's raining, you b'chuyev, just to bring up one small point, that lamaisa, some hold that when it's raining, it's not a sukkah. So then you have to understand, even if it's achila, you don't have a sukkah. But just to again understand, if the mitzvah is the achila, kazayis is enough. If the mitzvah is achila, you have to eat in the sukkah even if it's raining. But if the mitzvah is not the achila, if the mitzvah is the yeshiva in the sukkah, to accomplish a yeshiva, you have to have a kabeya. And besides having a kabeya, you also have to sit in a sukkah in a way that it's yeshiva, as opposed to when it's raining, it's not teishu kan teduru.
If it's not the achila, so if it's raining, it's not a sukkah anymore. Even if you just pater from the sukkah, it is a sukkah to your pater. So eat it in the house. It's like matzah. You can have it in the house and you'll be yotzi on achila. Why should you be sitting in the rain in the sukkah as well?
So these two parts that you're asking, and I'll say it over. One is that it's not a sukkah at all when it's raining. So if it's not a sukkah, right, that part, that's a good question. We're going to leave it on the side for now. We're going more that it's a sukkah, but he's a p'tur b'tstar. So for that point, the Meiri says that on the tzad that the mitzvah is achila, you know what the drasha is? The drasha is that you're mechuyev to eat and there's no teishvu kan teduru. The first night, there's no teishvu kan teduru, and therefore even a mitzvah is chayiv. but you also asked you should be able to eat inside. That much we understand that the mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. Even if it's achila, but obviously, let's say it's not raining, no one would have a tzad that just like you could eat matzah in your dining room, you could eat a kazayas of bread in the dining room. Obviously, we're going in the mitzvah of sukkah, which sukkah is to sit in the sukkah, even if it's a mitzvah achila. Which means this is important to get the two tzadim clearly. Whether the mitzvah is the achila, you have to eat it in the sukkah, and whether the mitzvah is yeshiva, you have to do a yeshiva with achila. But the question is, what is the mitzvah? Is the mitzvah achila, or the mitzvah is yeshiva? And we saw two nafkamanas, and then we'll see now a few more.
Rabbi, if it's raining and you're pata from the sukkah, how can your eating in the sukkah be considered eating in the sukkah?
Very well asked. That you're asking if it's raining and you pata from the sukkah, how can it be considered eating in the sukkah? The answer is that the first night, even if it's raining, you're not pata from sukkah. So you're going to look at me, what do you mean you're not pata? The Gemara says when it rains, you're pata from sukkah. The first night is different, and the reason it's different is because of the drush of tezvav. You're right. The first night you're talking about pata.
You gain nothing by eating in a rainy sukkah on the second night.
The second night we do everything based like the first night. It's a sveika de yoima. Chalamoid. So that's a good question. It's a shaila for itself. If mitzvah, if you call the Shulchan Aruch says mikri hediyit, that's a question for itself. What's the din if you anyways go into the sukkah? We'll leave it on the side for now. It's a good question. But we're speaking about the first night. Even though you're a mitzvah, you have to go inside. You have to go into the sukkah even though it's raining. What's the halacha about these two dinim that we spoke about? So the Shulchan Aruch says in Siv Gimel about the shear. The Shulchan Aruch says, "Achila b'sukkah b'leil yom tov harishon es chayva yemechuyev afilu achal kazayis pas yatsa." We said before it would depend what the mitzvah is if you need a kazayis or not. The Shulchan Aruch says a kazayis is enough. However, the poskim do say that one should be machmer and eat the first night and the second night to eat a kabei v'oid. Because we see it's a machlokes rishonim what the mitzvah is the mitzvah achila or the mitzvah is yeshiva. So too is the din lagabe if it's raining, the second din that we spoke about. Here it's actually not a machaber, it's a Ramah. The Ramah says, Yardu, the Shulchan Aruch, Yardu geshamim, you go inside. Yardu geshamim, areze nichnas l'tachabayis. Says the Ramah, v'chol ze dafke b'shar yomim, the other days of Yom Tiv, oy leilois, aval leila rishoina, you have to eat tzarech lechel kezayis b'sukkah, even if it's raining, after geshamim yardim. So we see the machaber, and here the Ramah lagabe rain, that a person is mechuyev to eat in the sukkah a kazayis, because it's the mitzvah sa'achila, and even if it's raining. Same here, says the Mishnah Berurah, that even though the Ramah says that you have to eat in the sukkah, even if it's raining the first night, however, if it's, first of all he says, don't make a bracha leishiv b'sukkah, because it's a machlokes rishonim what the mitzvah is, and al atzad the mitzvah is the yeshiva. You're not makayim the mitzvah. You can't make a leishiv b'sukkah. Mishnah Berurah Sivkat Lamed Hey, and then the Mishnah Berurah says in Lamed Vav Sivkat Lamed Vav that if it stops raining, you should go back into the sukkah and eat again, because it could be when you ate earlier you weren't yoitza. So that's so far we have very clearly two dinim. One is that since the mitzvah of Sunday night is the first night of Sukkot is achila, so a kazayis is enough. And so too, even in the rain, you're mechuyev to eat.
If it stops raining, you should go back out.
Yes, you should go back out and eat again. Even though when it rained, you ate in the sukkah because you wanted to be makayim the mitzvah, you should eat again, go into the sukkah and eat again. The Shabur even says to make a leishav sukkah, but yeah, you should go back again outside and eat again. So that's a very good question. When the Mishnah Berurah says, yo, very good. The Mishnah Berurah says when you go out the second time to make a leishiv, do you make a leishiv the first time? That's a good shaila. It's possible even that you made the first time, but you have to make again because you mesiach das, which means when you left the sukkah, you thought it was over. I'm not sure if you made once and you weren't Masiach Das, if you make again. That's a sugya for itself about Hesach Hadas with the Sukkah. It's a very complicated, with a lot of dinim, but technically it would be a mokum to say you should even make it again if you Masiach Das. But it depends how long and what the Hesach Hadas was. But one thing I could tell you is the Mishavura says that when you go back again, make a leishiv. Maybe he's talking about you to make a leishiv earlier. Let's move along to a few other nafkaminas ladina between the understanding if the mitzvah is the achila or the mitzvah is the yeshiva. The Rambam says by shofar that when a person blows shofar and the person who listens to shofar, you have to have kavana to be yotzei the mitzvah. What does that mean? Mitzvah tzrichas kavana, which would seem, and that's at a Shulchan Aruch paskins, that if a person does not have kavana, you're not yotzei. Shulchan Aruch and Siman Samach says that a person does the mitzvah. If you don't have kavanah, you're not yotzei. The question is, in Hilchos Matzah, the Rambam says that if somebody's forced to eat matzah, and he eats matzah, you're yotzei. Somebody who's forced to eat matzah and you ate the matzah, you're yotzei. Why are you yotzei? You didn't have kavanah. Mitzvah strichas kavanah. You have to have kavanah. So why, if you're forced to eat matzah, and you eat the matzah without kavanah, you're yotzei. L'chayra mitzvah tzrichas kavanah.
It's the only reason you're eating it.
So you said, what's your name again? I'm sorry, David. David is saying a point, and we're going to go to what Rabbi Chaim says. It could be this is what you mean. It could be you mean something else, which is not only by food. But Rabbi Chaim says the aside, just like you find by misasik b'chalovim v'arayis. Somebody who eats chaylev, you're over shekein chayiv, shekein nehena, means even though you're misasik, you didn't have a mind to do it, but still you're chayiv because shekein nehena, which means hana is as if you did have kavana. So too, says Reb Chaim, when you're eating the matzah, it's true somebody's forcing you to eat the matzah, but you're enjoying it, you're having hana. So that is like you have kavanah, and therefore you're yotzei.
I was saying it's like tefillin. I was thinking like tefillin. You put it on, even if you have kavanah, the only reason why you'll be putting it on in the first place
is for the mitzvah. What David's saying, I'll just cap it in a second, but it's relevant to a lot of mitzvahs. The Mishnah Brewer brings it in Hilchos Siman Samach by mitzvah tzrichas kavanah, that if you do a certain maisa, that it's maisa of moichichem, that you're only doing it for the mitzvah, then you're yotzei. Somebody gets up by the bima on Rosh Hashanah and is blowing shofar. It's pretty obvious you're doing it for the mitzvah. For what other reason would you do it? Other mitzvahs as well. But this is a point that was saying that it's if it's an achila, you're enjoying, it's as if you have kavanah. So this would be a big nafkamina by us the first night of Sukkot. We said very clearly these two tzadim what the mitzvah is. Is the mitzvah the achila, or the mitzvah is not the achila, the mitzvah is the yeshiva? If the mitzvah is the achila the first night of Sukkot, so even if somebody didn't have kavanah, it's a mitzvah deraisa to eat in the sukkah, but if you didn't have kavanah, you would still be yotzei, because achila, even if you don't have kavanah, shekein nehena, you're yotzei. But if the mitzvah is the yeshiva, true, the way to accomplish the yeshiva, how do you have the yeshiva in the sukkah? Is through eating. But what's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is the achila. The mitzvah is the yeshiva. If the mitzvah is the yeshiva, if you don't have kavanah, you're not going to be yotzei. So this is another nafkamina in what the mitzvah is the first night of Sukkot if somebody doesn't have kavanah. Mitzvah tzrichas kavanah. But if the mitzvah the first night of Sukkot is to eat, even if you don't have kavanah, it's possible that you'll be yotzei. Another nafkamina, it's discussed in the poskim. The poskim speak about the first night when you have that kazayas or kabeya v'oid of challah. Should you maybe not have it together with honey, with dips? Some people like to eat it with their fish. Why? Just like matzah, you're not allowed to eat the matzah with anything else. You have to eat the matzah, just the matzah as is. So too, when you eat that kazayas challah the first night of Sukkot, also, maybe you should only eat it by itself. a shaila in the poskim. It would be possible to say that it depends what the mitzvah is. It's not muchrach, but it could be that it's talui. If the mitzvah is yeshiva, then there is l'chayra no tzad that you should need to eat the challah by itself. As long as you accomplish yeshiva, you have to eat to have a yeshiva, but you can eat your bread, your challah with honey, with dips. As long as you're eating that accomplishes a yeshiva, that's enough. You can eat it with honey and dips. But if the mitzvah is the achila, it's nitinli amr that when we learn tezvav from matzah, just like matzah you have to eat by itself, so too the challah, the first night in the sukkah, you have to eat by itself. The Pri Megadim takes it even a step further, and the Pri Megadim says that you're not yoitze the first night, not yoitze, maybe he says the B'taras Efsher, with matzah ashira, which means you would have to have water challah. The first night, not only can you add to your challah other things, dips and honey, even the challah itself you shouldn't have other things mixed in. Dumya the matzah's flour and water. So too, the first night should also only be water challah.
You have to bake it.
Oh, Menachem is a good point. You have to bake it l'shem mitzvah. Do you have to bake it within 18 minutes? In other words, what Menachem's asking, it's a very big chiddush. What the Pri Megadim is saying is, where do you define, you cut the line? He doesn't say that you have to eat matzah, shmura matzah. So Elamai, we learn tezvav, that it's a achila. But does it have to be baked within 18 minutes? Does it have to be done l'shma? That's a big chiddush. The other dinim also, yeah, it's a chiddush. But moving back to the other point along these lines, that we see there's a shaila in the poskim about eating the challah with other items with it, honey, fish, dips, would depend what the mitzvah is. If the mitzvah is the achila, so we could hear, b'doymet hamatzah, you have to eat a pure kazayas without other things mixed in. But if the mitzvah is the yeshiva, l'chayra, it's very hard to see why there should make a difference of eating other things with the challah. You're accomplishing the yeshiva with the kazayas, with eating. You have other things mixed in.
Is the pas absolutely deraisa? The pas itself.
What about the pas itself?
The achila of the pas, is that deraisa?
Yes.
You can't eat anything else that's in it? And something else would be called
Pas haba b'kissin, and we'll speak about it afterwards because I still want to say another nafkamina or two. But Tosfos speaks about it. Lagabe, the first shaila we spoke about. We'll speak about it afterwards. But yes, you have to have a kvius, you have to have a suda, you have to have pas. The shaila is just how much. Right. Another nafkamina would be, what's the halacha about eating the first night in the sukkah l'teyavan? Matzah, the first night of Pesach, there's a din to eat l'teyavan. The Mishnah in the beginning of the 10th parak of Pesachim says that a person lo yoichal mechatzois ve'elach, you should not eat. So when you eat the matzah Pesach by night, you should eat it l'teyavan. What's about sukkahs? Is there a din that when it comes leil sukkahs that you should eat in the sukkah that achila l'teyavan? So the Darkei Moshe brings the maril, which is brought lahalacha in the Shulchan Aruch, that a person shouldn't eat erev Yom Tov mechatzois. So when you eat in the sukkah by night, it should be l'teyavan. It's a Ramah, v'lo yoichal b'yoyim mechatzois ve'elach erev Yom Tov k'dei sheyoichal b'sukkah l'teyavan. You should eat l'teyavan. Dum yed achilas matzah. Frek the Darkei Moshe, I don't understand. L'teyavan, by matzah, there's a mitzvah to eat matzah. Masha Enkin, sitting in the sukkah. The mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. You accomplish sitting in the sukkah by eating, but the mitzvah is to sit in the sukkah. Meaning to say, if you need l'teyavan in the sukkah the first night or not, would depend what the mitzvah is. If the mitzvah is the achila in the sukkah, so then just like matzah, the mitzvah is achila, you would need the achila l'teyavan. But if the mitzvah is not achila, the mitzvah is the yeshiva, so then the yeshiva is only applicable, yeshiva is even when it's not l'teyavan also, l'maisa, you have a yeshiva. It would be tali in this shaila. one final nafkamina, and that would be, Rabbi Ber brings this nafkamina. What would be if somebody steals this challah, this kezayis of challah, the first night of Yom Tif? He has a stolen challah. If somebody steals a lulav, it's mitzvah haba ba'aveira. You can't be Hachaim a mitzvah with an item that is an aveira. This lulav is stolen. It's mitzvah haba ba'aveira. However, if somebody steals a shofar and blows the shofar, if you hear the koil from that shofar, you're yoitza. You shouldn't do it, but you're yoitza. Why are you yoitza by the koil from a stolen shofar? Because the mitzvah is not the shofar. The mitzvah is l'shmoya koil shofar, to hear the sound. The sound is not stolen. The shofar is stolen. By lulav, if you steal a lulav, you makayim the mitzvah with the lulav is stolen. So the mela would depend over here what the mitzvah is. Person steals a challah, Rahman al-Itzlan, and he goes into the sukkah. If the mitzvah is the achila, so then it's a mitzvah haba ba'aveira, because you're being makayim the mitzvah with eating this bread that's stolen. Yeah. But if the mitzvah is not the achila, the mitzvah is sitting in the sukkah. You're accomplishing the yeshiva through eating. So then it's true that you're accomplishing it through eating a bread that's stolen, but the mitzvah itself that you're doing is not an aveira, and therefore you'll be makayim. So we have over here clearly, with all these nafkaminas, two ways how to understand what the mitzvah is the first night. Is the mitzvah the achila, or is the mitzvah the yeshiva? Just to point out the Chassam Sofer and the Tshuva, when speaking about the mitzvah of achila of matzah, the Chassam Sofer says that achilas matzah is the only mitzvah achila in the Torah. So the mitzvah of achila of Erev Yom Kippur we spoke about over here last week, that it's a shaila in the Rishonim, if the achila is the mitzvah or not, if these are mitzvahs achila midaraisa or not. But based on what we're saying over here for eating in the sukkah, it would depend what the mitzvah is. If the mitzvah is achila, so we have another mitzvah which is achila, eating in the sukkah. But if the mitzvah is yeshiva, so then it's not the achila. So just to sum up all the nafkaminas in 30 seconds, one would be how much you have to eat the first night, depending what the mitzvah is. Is a kezayis enough? If it's achila, kezayis is enough. But if you need to accomplish a yeshiva, you have to have a kviyas, a kabeya v'oid. Another nafkamina would be if it's raining. If the mitzvah is achila, you have to eat in the sukkah. But if the mitzvah is yeshiva, rain, you're potter. You have to wait till it stops raining. Or if you ate already, you have to go on when it's not raining. Another nafkamina would be in the two ways I'd understand the mitzvahs if you're not machaven. If a person's not machaven, what's the halacha if you're yoitza? If the mitzvah is achila, we saw the chiddush from Hachaim, that it could be still yoitza, because when eating, that gives you a kavana. Another nafkamina would be is if could you put honey and dips onto the challah? If the mitzvah is achila, maybe not. But if the mitzvah is yeshiva, it doesn't make a difference. You can put on whatever you want. L'teyavan. Is there an inyan to eat l'teyavan, a din to eat l'teyavan? The Shulchan Aruch Ramah says you should, depending what the mitzvah. If the mitzvah is achila, so you need achila l'teyavan. If the mitzvah is yeshiva, the pashtus, you're sitting in the sukkah, doesn't make a difference if when you're eating, you have a teyavan for it. And one final nafkamina would be, is mitzvah ba'aveira. If somebody steals that challah and he eats it, if the mitzvah is the achila, so it's a mitzvah ba'aveira. But if the mitzvah is the yeshiva, so the mitzvah that he's doing, he's sitting in the sukkah. Elamai, what he eating the challah, so that's something that just helps you accomplish it. That won't be considered mitzvah ba'aveira, and you'll be yoitza. Good Shabbos and a good Yom Tov.